Barely Emerging is recorded on the lands of the Kaurna people. We at Haunted Cow Collective acknowledge the Kaurna people and all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the sovereign custodians of this country. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
I was going to say hide and seek, Chip.
Yeah. Of course. You'd like this little baby fawn, you've gone off and gone, please sir, may I have some money? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Barely Emerging. Today we are going to be talking about grants and artist opportunities. My name's Sid.
And I'm Francis. Guess what?
What?
We're artists in residence at UniSA now.
Yo!
Woo, woo, woo. That means that we will be able to have a space there to do some in situ recordings. So if any of you guys are around UniSA campus, please hit us up.
Yep.
And we would love to chat with you all.
So this week we'll be talking about artist grants and opportunities. So we'll be looking at a brief history of them and also a couple of places to find them and where you can apply. Over to you in the field, Francis.
All right. So before we get into the different types of arts grants and where to find them and who can apply for them, let's just have a little bit of a look at the history of art funding in Australia. So the history of arts funding goes pretty well back to pre-Federation. Mm-hmm. So the first ever instance of government art funding was 2 cows.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, that's us.
Yeah. So we got paid to a guy called Michael Massey Robinson, who wrote birthday poems for George III and Queen Charlotte in 1818 and 1819 and was paid accordingly. Mm-hmm. It's the pretty well only instance of a poet laureate in Australia and the only time an artist has ever been paid in livestock. But for my money, bring it back.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it back.
Give me a fucking cow.
I would love to get paid in chickens. Are you serious?
Oh, my God.
Dude, like horses are so expensive. Just pay me in a fucking horse.
But please give me the land to have them on.
Oh, yeah. So there was nothing really from 1819 onwards, but then in 1908, the Commonwealth Literary Fund was the first systematic support for the arts, and that was founded by the Deakin government. Mm-hmm. However, the Commonwealth Literary Fund acted as a pension for aged or infirm authors. So receiving this pension was actually considered shameful, and recipients of the Literary Fund were not publicly announced. So instead of, here's some money for your endeavors, like, you know, you have this project or this book you want to write, fantastic, here's some money for it. It was more like,
you're old and decrepit and here's some money.
It was more like, yeah, you've got bad carpal tunnel from holding your quill. So, you know, you're on a pension now.
Yep.
In 1939, the Literary Fund expanded to include a small number of fellowships to quote unquote great authors, which then continued until the 1960s. So the first time we really saw any kind of like advance money to support something new being made was in about 1939. So from 1819 to 1939, it took them a while. There was probably other shit that needed their attention more than the arts.
I am literally just very surprised that some guy got 2 cows for being a poet. Love it.
And he was a convict. His story, not that it matters, but it's kind of interesting. So his thing was that he was like an Oxford educated lawyer, but he used to write political witticisms, like quips. And he got convicted for like libel and got sent to the colonies, as they were then called. And I don't know, kept running amok while he was here, kept penning his little witticisms, kept getting put in jail.
And Australia said, here, have some fucking cows.
Australia said, write some shit for the fucking king and queen, and here is 2 cows for your trouble.
Yeah, nice.
So funding for other areas of the arts began once Australia established a model of distribution known as the Arts Council model. So this model was influenced by the Council for the Encouragement of Music in the Arts, or CEMA, which was set up by the British government during World War II. So this was to boost civilian morale by funding performances by theatre groups, orchestras and dancers. Notably, it also issued grants and guarantees against loss for performing arts companies. So that's another big precedent there. Like during the Second World War, there was actually a little bit of a safety net set up for the arts. This was in England, but it got to us eventually. In 1942, CEMA added specialist panels for drama, music and the visual arts that would review applications for funding. So this is the first time that we're seeing like actual dedicated departments, I suppose. So rather than everyone vying for the same kind of funding, like everyone from painters to, you know, cellists to ballet dancers, they had separate ones for each individual discipline, which kind of evens the playing field a little bit. So mad respect for the oversight that they would actually need that at some point. In 1943, the Department of Post-War Reconstruction began in Australia. So they began discussions around boosting funding for the arts under the direction of the excellently named Nugget Coombs. Oh, this is my favourite name I've ever heard. Yeah. He sought to enrich the lives of Australians by making the arts viable and more easily accessible. He came up with a federal arts funding plan, but that was nixed in 1949 as the newly appointed Menzies government considered it evidence of socialism.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, Menzies was not a big advocate nor patron of the arts, so kind of unfortunate but understandable that that would not survive under him.
Yeah, it's crazy how some person at the top's bias affects everyone below.
It's crazy, but it happens everywhere all the time. In 1954, however, the government-funded Australian Elizabethan Theatre Trust was established to honour the then-new Queen Elizabeth. This was used to establish the companies that would later go on to become the Australian Opera, the Australian Ballet, the Melbourne Theatre Company, and the Sydney Theatre Company. So 1954 is when we first started to see a real like push for patronage of the arts, and even then it was usually just theatre and music. So visual arts still had a little bit of a way to go. By the end of the 1960s, though, many of the schemes that were originally penned by the Federal Arts Funding Plan had actually come to fruition, as there was a greater push in support of the arts, and that turned into the Arts Council of Australia, which was supported by the then Prime Minister and swimming enthusiast Harold Holt.
Swimming enthusiast. I like how you slipped that in there. That nearly went over my head.
I was going to say hide and seek champion.
Yeah. Of course. So for those of you who don't know who Harold Holt is and why that's funny, have a look.
In 1967, the first iteration of what would become the Australia Council took shape under the guide of our mate Nugget Coombs. Again, the real MVP of arts funding was Nugget. So Nugget Coombs wanted it to be the statutory authority of arts funding, which it did become in 1975 under the Whitlam government. From that point onwards, artists and arts organisations were subsidised through the Australia Council. It stayed that way all the way up until 2015. So a good chunk of time, arts funding was dictated by this Australia Council.
Yep.
But in 2015, the then Arts Minister, Senator George Brandis, introduced a new entity called the National Program for Excellence in the Arts, or NPER.
I always say that as NEPA.
Yeah, you'd think it would be. And I'm like, yes, sick acronym. It doesn't roll off the tongue. NPER.
NPER.
So this new scheme took $105 million from the Australia Council budget and put it into the Arts Ministry to be directed and distributed by Brandis himself. This seemed like an attempt to get rid of the Australia Council as the major distributor of funding. This was a big thing because since the council was funded, it had maintained a bipartisan, arm's-length approach to funding the arts, free from ministerial control.
Yes.
At the end of 2015, Brandis was replaced by Mitch Fifield, who renamed BER to Catalyst. NEPA to Catalyst, and reinvested $32 million back into the Australia Council. But that left a deficit of $73 million in arts funding for that year, which led to 65 arts organisations losing their funding. Funding for the arts took another hit in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, where money from the budget was redirected, causing many arts organisations to lose their funding. So it can be argued that distancing arts from the political process by means of bipartisan funding marginalises the arts and encourages the government not to take it seriously. But it can also be argued that arm's length funding benefits government officials because it allows them to distance themselves from the controversies that artworks can provoke. The problem with government-issued arts funding is that, for better or worse, the value of the arts is very hard to quantify. If it is art experts or artists themselves that are making the decisions on who or what should be funded, it's often hard to justify and can look from the outside like it's just a case of friends funding their friends. And furthermore, there is little economy of scale in presenting artistic works. The cost of presenting a work to 10 people is often the same amount of overhead that presenting it to 1,000 people would be. And this is where placing a dollar value on art becomes hard. Placing a value in the revenue does not serve the purpose of art, And because that purpose is not a strict necessity like a doctor or a mechanic, it cannot adjust itself as such. Ticket prices to art events can't increase to cover rising labour costs because audiences won't buy them. And ticket prices can't be determined by the market like petrol prices because this would result in an unsustainable loss. And only programming popular work in the hope that more people buy tickets ignores the social responsibility of the arts to challenge audiences, reflect society and expand its medium. But Art Council funding is, according to economist David Throsby, a means of satisfying both sides of this argument. He says it suits consumers because they feel they're getting an independent view of the way in which art should develop, and it satisfies government because it produces the sorts of things that generate the public benefits which the arts can produce. So this is where private funding tends to come in.
Yep.
A lot of the grants that are available throughout Adelaide especially, a lot of them are government funded, but a lot of them are also private funded. So that is when an organisation will have private donors or patrons, or that's when they will do art prizes. So you're essentially buying a lottery ticket to exhibit your work, which then goes back into the organisation itself.
Yep.
And this can be a good way of doing it because it is artist driven. It doesn't rely on the government or any other kind of external cabinet to justify or quantify its quality or its meaning or its like validity in, you know, a social sense, I suppose, or a historical sense. The other side of that is it's privately funded. And if it doesn't get the funding, it falls on its ass.
And also whoever has the money dictates the art.
Yeah, I think that is just an inescapable thing. You know, it's like if art is going to be externally funded by a government body or by a privately funded body, anything that is outside of you as the autonomous practitioner, if you're getting funding from anywhere else, you're always going to be beholden to the people who are giving you that money. This comes to cases of, you know, arts grants where the funding has been rescinded if the artwork that is then made is like too controversial or goes against, you know, the image that the patron wants to project.
Yeah. So notably, there is such a case with Casey Jenkins. She was given money from Creative Australia to make her work. It was then COVID and she was no longer able to make her first planned work. So she re-proposed for a different artwork that could be accessed by anyone via the internet, and it was called Immaculate. So this was the artwork where she was already going through IVF and she was self-inseminating online.
Right.
So there was a lot of controversy on people thinking about the child's rights in the fact that they thought she was doing the IVF for an artwork piece, but she was already doing it. So rumours were spread that she was only doing it for art and she was only having a child because of the art piece, but that's completely untrue. And there is actually a court case where Jenkins is getting the money back for this.
So regardless of the artwork being made, there is always the looming threat, I suppose, that any money that an artist is given can be taken away.
Yeah.
So this is where non-conditional, like one-off grants and funds can come in big handy. Any funding that you are given for your practice externally can be taken away at any moment, or you can be forced to repay in some cases. But that isn't a reason to shy away from getting a grant or getting a fellowship or getting funding if you need it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't need it, sometimes it's just good practice to write in for grants.
Yeah.
One thing I wish I did when I was at university was actually apply for grants, actually apply for scholarships. I think we had a sit-down tutorial or like a lecture or something, and someone from an external funding body, I think it could have been Helpmann, it could have been Guildhouse, I can't quite remember, but they came in and they told us about how we can apply for grants while we're still studying.
Yeah. And that was like mind-blowing.
It was also mind-blowing, but at the time I was just like, I don't need this information.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm in the very beginnings of a practice right now. Like I'm learning color theory. I don't have anything to apply for or to get. But the thing with grants is that some of them don't need to be for anything in particular. You can just get a grant for materials. You can get a grant for developing your practice. It's just like, it's almost like a one-off good faith payment that this external funding body wants to inject some flow into the arts in any means of support that they can.
And not to say that they are or aren't dictated, but some of them do have concessions on them. So you have to acquit after, you have to give them a blow-by-blow during the grant time of what you've done with it and how you've spent it. But some of them are just like, here, you're financially stressed. Here's some money.
Yeah. So again, obviously when you're applying for a grant, you do need to read the fine print of them. Make sure that the kind of grant that you're applying for is going to suit your purpose. Like you don't want to be applying for like a project and marketing grant when all you want is a professional development grant.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to get this thing and then you're going to be expected to mount a huge show interstate or overseas, and you're still a second year at uni. So there are some study specific scholarships and grants that you can get. We looked up the UniSA scholarships. UniSA obviously is our alma mater, but obviously I'm sure that any kind of tertiary institution will have their own versions of these.
Yep.
So scholarships are, it's pretty much just like you get fees waived for a certain amount of things. So a lot of them are, you know, between 5,000 or 2,000 for certain things. We are going to include links to all of the grants and the grant funding bodies that we talk about today. We will link that in the description under this episode. But for those that don't like to click through links, if you go to UniSA/students/scholarships/undergraduate scholarships, there is a little link to click on where you can narrow down to UniSA Creative. So that is UniSA Creative School, I think, includes everything from architecture to painting and like creative writing. And they have like different scholarships for different disciplines. Some of them you can apply for in like all disciplines. They will tell you who can apply for them and they will tell you how much they are. And then if you click on each individual scholarship, it'll give you a little bit more of a rundown about what that particular scholarship will entail. So it'll be an artist in residency grant. So that just gives you a space to work from while you're studying. Or it'll be like a materials grant, or it's just a straight up like, here's a goodwill grant to help you with your materials this semester. So outside of like study specific grants, there are other places to seek funding from. Helpmann Academy is a notable one. I think they are for students and people up to 5 years out of tertiary education.
Yeah, most of their opportunities are for people who have participated in their partner institutions.
One of the great ones that you can apply for and that we would encourage you to apply for if you are a student and you're not sure if you need a big injection of money into your practice, but it is a really good like practice for applying for bigger grants later on down the track. Helpmann Academy do something called the Creative Boost Grant. So it provides emerging creatives with a quick boost of up to $500 just to support you when you're just starting out. So it's available for any eligible emerging artist. You can use the fund to purchase essential services and materials, pay for any immediate costs. If you're developing small projects, building digital skills, developing your audience, can be used to purchase, hire, upgrade technology or equipment, train in new skills. It can be used to purchase materials and tools. It can be used to pay for costs associated with your practice like rental, website hosting, and can be used for things like marketing and creating your online business.
So if you've put in an application for an exhibition and you need money for materials for that exhibition, you can apply for this grant and then spend it on your materials, or you can spend it on actually hiring the gallery space as well.
Hiring the gallery space, or if you are still at uni doing study, you can use it to pay for any materials that may be associated with the costs of taking your classes. I remember from doing ceramics that the clay was often quite expensive. So that's a really good one. They do have on their website, before you start your application, there is like a check your eligibility here. There is also information for applicants, guidelines, and a grant writing tip sheet. The great thing about Helpmann Academy is that they will read drafts if you send it to them.
Yep.
So particularly if you are a student and it's like kind of your first foray into writing grants, these places, they want you to succeed. They are given a certain amount of money either from the government or from their patrons that they need to acquit. They need to, like, they're given a grant to give you a grant, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so they want to help you on your journey. They are there to do that.
And one of the grants writing sessions that I went to, they really stressed getting in touch with them beforehand because they're in there to fight for you to get the money. So if they know you, if they've had meetings with you where you've talked about your idea, they can champion you on it because they know you, they know your face, they know what painstaking stuff that you've gone through. So if there's like something in your application that is seesawing between the people who are funding and and Helpmann Academy, they'll go, no, actually, this is what they want and how they want to get it.
Yeah, it's a lot of things in the arts is really just
who you know.
Unfortunately, it is who you know, but it's also not unfortunate in the sense of it can work to your advantage in that way. It's not even a case of having to like schmooze up to these people. It's just if you are genuinely interested and you are genuinely, you know, trying to further your practice and I suppose put your name out there in a way, they will see that and they will help you do that. So Helpmann is a good one if you are still studying or if you're just out of study.
The unfortunate thing about that is you have to study in one of their catchments.
Yeah, we'll get on to grants and types of funding that aren't education specific in just a moment. Obviously, UniSA is going to be education specific, same with Flinders University or University of Adelaide or any of the TAFEs that you may study at. And Helpmann, of course, does have the stipulation that you needed to study. Guildhouse, I'm not 100% sure. Are you, if you needed to study or not?
No, they are open to anyone because they do insurance for anyone as well.
Okay.
But they do specials for students.
Okay. So Guildhouse is not just a source of grants. It is also, they're a service, I suppose. Yeah. They help with development. They are also a membership-based organisation that often put on like workshops, grant writing workshops, things like that. They have fellowships, different kinds of like mentorships, like residencies. The Guildhouse Fellowship is one. It's valued at over $50,000. So that is a lot of money. This is awarded to a South Australian artist who is mid-career. So that is someone that has been doing this for a minute. It's not someone that is, you're not emerging. So Helpmann is going to be good if you're studying or if you're the first few years out of study. Guildhouse is going to be a great one to go to if you've got a few exhibitions under your belt.
Yeah, you're 5 years out, you're no longer eligible for any Helpmann grants, and now you got to go get your big boy pants on and go apply for the mainstream stuff.
Yeah, according to their page, this fellowship is intended for artists who have moved beyond the early years of their practice. They have a distinct artistic expression and seek an expansive opportunity to explore, research, and create. It is awarded to artists who can demonstrate its instrumentality to their arts practice and thus their contribution to the ambition and artistic excellence of the visual arts sector in South Australia.
Yeah.
So a lot of these ones, like I think Guildhouse is in partnership with the Art Gallery of South Australia. So this is a little bit more of like your big boy / intermediate kind of fellowship.
And I think it's good to note here the difference between a fellowship and a grant. So a grant is like a cash injection. You get it and then you acquit it. Yeah. A fellowship is something that it's like a living wage. You get it. Well. You're allowed to spend it on living while you do this project. So they will give you the stipulation of the project needs and wants, but the money is a little bit more loose. You've got that as like a living wage.
A fellowship will usually have some kind of concrete end goal. This one in particular has, like $35,000 to support research and development, including the creation of a new work. So because it is in partnership with the Art Gallery of South Australia, the caveat to the fellowship is that you present the new work that you've made throughout the fellowship in their gallery.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Sarah Waters was the last one who had this.
Yes.
And her work was fantastic. I love Sarah Waters.
We love us some Sarah Waters. So other forms of arts funding can also come from just your councils. So the City of Adelaide does their own kind of arts and cultural grants, sponsorships and incentives. So they can fund everything from like a celebration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures in the city, arts and cultural programs and events, live music, artistic development, public artworks, marketing and promotions. So they do a lot of different grants for a lot of different areas of the arts.
With all of these grants, you do have to look out for the dates as well.
Yes.
And you have to plan for them sometimes.
Yeah, and don't leave these things to the last minute because a lot of the time they will ask for like letters of recommendation. So like if you're just applying for a bunch of jobs the night before, you can't really do that with art grants because you need to, like, say there's like a lecturer at your university, you need to hit them up, get them to write you a letter of recommendation for a lot of these ones.
And they've got their own stuff on, so
they've got their own stuff on. That is to say, not every grant or funding will have that. A lot of the ones that are not hinged on education, so like more of like the council grants and stuff, they won't ask you for things like that.
But it is still quite a setup to apply for a grant.
It is, but
it's less hinged on getting someone else to write something for you.
It's worth giving yourself some time to find out what they do need.
Mm-hmm.
So Adelaide Council have major round grants, which have their like application window and their notification time frame. But then they also do throughout the year just short turnaround grants. So these are year round until the funds are expended. So they have set pocket of money set aside for this kind of funding. So they need to just kind of like go through it till they've used it all up. The turnaround time for those is 15 business days. So these ones are good if you have like an unexpected expense or like an oversight in your expenditure and you're kind of like, oh shit, I need kiln hire.
Yeah.
So these must be submitted at least 30 days before the project start date. So not that much of a last minute oversight, but
still more last minute than waiting a whole year for a grant round.
Yeah, more last minute than the major grant rounds.
Yeah.
So those ones are really beneficial. You can find them at cityofadelaide.com. Again, we will link them.
There's also a lot of places that you can find grants on web pages. So we've got ArtsHub where you can just search up for grants in your area. I think they do a lot of national sort of stuff. So it's not just in Adelaide. You can look for grants everywhere.
Yeah, there's ArtsHub. I think Nava as well do have a page dedicated to these kind of opportunities. Again, a lot of these opportunities, it's just knowing where to find them because then once you know where to find them, they have like fact sheets, like eligibility requirements, everything that you need to know will be outlined on their website. The Department of the Premier and Cabinet in South Australia also do their own version of grants. So this is independent from the council. They do different ones as well. They do that for individuals, groups and organisations. They include professional development, market development, fellowships and the SALA publication as well. So SALA, obviously the South Australia Living Artists Festival. They do the project grants for independent artists and groups, for community, public art and design, and then major projects like biennale, triennial, major commissions. So anything that's going to be a big public display of art.
And sometimes you need to look at what you'll need for this sort of stuff. So do you need an ABN? Do you need to be registered for GST? Do you need insurance before you apply for any of these things? And sometimes you don't.
There's a really great website called calendarforartists.com. They have it's kind of just like a compendium of competitions, awards, prizes, listing in closing date order. So if you go to their website, which we will link underneath this description, and go to their resources tab, they have funding and grant resources. And then it just has literally a list of different places where you can find sources of funding.
From big to small.
From big to small, from in order of, closing to least closing.
Least closing. Least amount of time you've got to get your points for Centrelink.
A lot of government and council web pages as well will just have, like funding and support. And then if you click through them, they'll have like different kind of funding types.
Yeah.
So that goes like regional support, like Country Arts SA as well. Access to Arts as well also have a great list of opportunities for artists. Access to Arts also do fantastic work with people with disabilities. They also, as well as just funding, they have like workshops. They also have a lot of like regional and international opportunities as well, which is fantastic.
With Access to Arts and Country Arts, why we're mentioning them is because they're not government funded. They are separate from the government, but they may get grants from them. They collect their own money to put on projects for people.
Yeah, I think if you take away anything from this episode, it's that money has to come from somewhere. If it's government funded or if it's privately funded, there is going to be stipulations to the money that you're getting. So what you should really do is like, we can give you the resources about where and how to apply for grants, but it's important to read the fact sheets and do your own research into these kinds of things, because you don't want to apply for something and then have it taken away or apply for something and then have to pay it back or something like that.
So, and it also depends on your own personal sort of ideal, I guess. So if you're doing artwork that is against big oil companies and you're getting funded by big oil companies, for one, they're probably not going to let you have that money anymore.
They're not going to. If you pull it off, you have the biggest balls in history.
And if you do pull it off, then it also depends on how you feel about that as well.
I have only applied for a couple of grants in my time. A lot of that, though, was because when I was at university and they came and spoke to us about grants, I was like, that doesn't apply to me. Or I feel like I am not an artist enough to apply for this position. And then when I got, more out of uni and got more experience in exhibitions under my belt, I was also fortunate enough that I've always had a space to work from, and again, being a painter, I don't have a whole lot of overhead. So it's completely like you don't have to apply for grants and funding. It doesn't make you quote unquote any less of an artist if you do or don't. Know that these things can be very competitive. If you don't get the funding, it's very, very, very little to do with you and your actual merit as an artist. It's more to do with like timing or, you know, the particular panel if they were looking to fund a certain project and someone was giving that to them. There's a whole lot of other moving parts than just yourself. With these things, it's just apply for everything and see what you get.
Yeah, so I think the rejection shock, you do have to get over that. Like, it is hard because art is such a personal thing and it's come from the deep darks of your soul. And then you're putting it out there. You're like this little baby fawn. You've gone off and gone, please, sir, may I have some money? And they've gone, absolutely not. It's not like that. It is literally just maybe it just wasn't the fit for the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is some other notable sort of things that we won't go completely into, but there are artist-run initiatives. There are prizes that you can go for, and they're all just kind of Googles where you can find them.
Art prizes is one that what we were just saying before about how if you apply for something and don't get it, all it means is that you just need to keep applying. It's very much the same with art prizes. I have a bit of a wound with art prizes, I suppose. And we touched on this a little bit in our Centrelink episode where because of the nature of an art prize, the whole point of them is to get funding for, you know, the organization or the artist run initiative or even just to mount the exhibition. So you're paying a pretty lofty, in some cases, ticket price to enter your work in. And it can be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow if you are paying a $75 entrance fee to upload a JPEG to have it be rejected. But things like that, again, very little is actually based on your merit as an artist. A lot of the time with art prizes, particularly art prizes that are going to be mounted for exhibition, a lot of the time it's like, how is it going to look in the space? How is it going to be curated?
This?
So with a lot of funding and opportunities in the arts, the biggest thing is just be persistent. You know, like if you don't get the grant this round, you might get it another round. If you don't get this grant, you might get another one. If you don't enter into the art prize, you won't be in the running to be in the art prize, you know?
It is sometimes a hard pill to swallow, and that's why there is the wound there because you've actually given money to this. You've
given money to this, but it is kind of helpful to perhaps look at it in a way of you've made a contribution to an organisation that is going to help keep the arts alive in Adelaide. It's not so much I paid $75 to get rejected. Like how I've thought about it and still think about it, and I'm still kind of wounded by that.
I guess it is like when it is the last $75 in your account, it really does feel a little bit personal.
So there are different types of funding. It's just knowing what's right for you and right for your practice, I suppose.
That's right.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today. All of the links that we have talked about today will be under this episode. It is going to be a very heavy link.
There's a lot of resources to get through. Frances is going to have a lovely time linking all of those. I'll organize it the best that I can to make it easier for you guys. I will put it under like emerging artists and like education heavy artists. I will put it under like education opportunities or, you know, like those kind of prerequisite like early artist opportunities and then other.
There's going to be a heavy tap on the other. But yeah, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Thanks guys.
Thank you. It is.
You've been listening to Barely Emerging, a podcast by Haunted Cow Collective. You can find us on our website at hauntedcow.com.au, at our Instagram at Barely Emerging, or on YouTube and Instagram at Haunted Cow Collective. This podcast is made by emerging artists for emerging artists, and together we are Barely Emerging.